69% of employees say they don't have enough opportunity for social connection at work. And we know 3 in 5 employees say that their leaders are not doing a good enough job of trying to build strong community and connectedness within the organization.
Steven, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Before we jump in, Steven, tell everyone a little bit more about your background and then your journey to where we are now.
Yes, I've spent the last 14 years as a leadership consultant, HR consultant, do a lot of work in learning and development. The journey essentially started when I was 14. And when I was 14, I played competitive soccer. And as a competitive soccer player, I spent, basically all of my time at practice and games and was really into it. I used to be very good, right? Pre-beard, I was really fast and really slim. Now I'm kind of slow and my skills aren't what they used to be. But when I was 14, my brother, who at the time was 8, was playing soccer, and none of the parents wanted to coach my brother's soccer team. So they asked me, as the big brother who was playing soccer, do you want to coach a bunch of 8-year-olds who are in Park District Soccer? And I was all over it.
How old were you at the time?
I was 14. So I was a teenager,
Okay.
right? 8th grade. And I spent a lot of time working with these 8-year-olds and putting them through drills and being in charge of practice and being on the sideline during the games. And I loved it. I loved every single second of coaching, of mentoring, of teaching. And that was my first taste of what that experience feels like to be in that kind of a role. And that experience as a 14-year-old has stuck with me all the way through my career. So when I graduated from college, got into grad school, wanted to be a consultant, really was interested in leadership and people and engagement and culture, and got my master's degree in organizational development. And I've spent the past 14 years working with a lot of the world's top companies to help them build up their leaders, create the right kinds of culture. And through that, I met a guy named Ryan. Ryan is a future of work thought leader, speaks about millennials and Gen Z, has a lot of really good research on how to engage, develop, and retain young talent. And when we started to collaborate, he was writing a book on Gen Z, and he came across this statistic that 79% of Gen Zers in 2019 sometimes or always feel alone. And that statistic really grabbed him. And when he shared it with me, it really grabbed me. And we thought, holy smokes, you have 80% of the fastest growing working generation flooding into the workforce feeling socially disconnected and lonely. That's a problem. So we started to put together all of these materials to help our clients understand, how do you reconnect a disconnected workforce, right? These young professionals coming in. COVID hit and we had all this stuff about feeling lonely at work, and we went to client after client and everyone said, we want to talk about this. And then we reached out to some agents for a book deal. Every agent wanted to represent us. We went to the biggest publishers in the world and we chose McGraw-Hill to publish our book. And last year it hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. And I've been knee deep in just doing a lot of work with clients to help them understand why building really strongly, more meaningfully connected teams is super important to businesses' success and longevity. So
Wow.
That's the journey. And that's where a lot of my time is being spent right now.
It almost feels like, obviously the pandemic was an awful moment in time, but it feels like fate that you kind of met, had that conversation, and all of a sudden, little did you know how important that your work would become.
Timing is everything. But it's really interesting because when I think about the work that I've done as a leadership development consultant and a thought leader in that space and as a coach, when you think about leaders and what you can teach them and focus on as it relates to their development, there are so many things you can focus on, right? Like a leader's role and responsibility is massive. And the part of leadership that I've always really gravitated towards is the element of how leaders are able to really connect deeply with their teams. Even before I started to do the work on loneliness, write the book, partner with my partner, Ryan, I've always just had a affinity and I guess a passion around that specific part of leadership. And I've seen it firsthand, what happens when leaders are really good at building those dynamics into their teams. And I'm a big believer that you can't have a really high-powered, super functioning team if the relationships with those team members are frayed and there's missing opportunities there. So in 2019, it exploded, but I've been really focused on that world of work for over a decade now.
Why is it so important to address workplace loneliness? Break that down.
There's so much to break down. We'll start with the biological sensation that occurs when someone feels lonely. My favorite study that I came across when we were doing research for the book was this study where in 2011 researchers put these subjects through an experience of exclusion. And these subjects were wearing an fMRI brain map, and they wanted to figure out where does this sensation register in the brain. And they found that the part of the brain that registers feelings of exclusion is the same part of the brain that registers physical pain.
Oh, wow.
And that means that when someone feels lonely, excluded, disconnected, rejected, etc., their brain is actually flashing a fight or flight response. And that fight or flight response is releasing very harmful and very dangerous stress hormones. And a chronic release of these stress hormones is really bad for us physically and mentally. And it's why the statistic around chronic loneliness is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day is regularly well-known statistic, is because our brain is under fight or flight, and it's harming us with all these, different responses. So from just a pure biological standpoint, when someone shows up to work under fight or flight, under a chronic state of stress, and their body is responding in this way and their brain's on fire, it's impossible for them to do deep, meaningful work, to show up as the best version of themselves, to be really engaged with their colleagues or their clients or their customers. They're just surviving. And that in and of itself is a pretty big alarm to say, like, this matters. We should be aware of this and do something to help people not come to work and feel this way. So just starting there, I'll stop and answer any questions you might have, because physically, emotionally, and mentally, the stress that is put on employees when they show up feeling socially disconnected is a big deal.
Do a lot of people that you speak to, do they know that they're feeling lonely?
The word lonely is a weird word, Chris. People would not openly admit or be aware of those sensations as being loneliness. Loneliness is almost misconstrued as being this very embarrassing, almost shameful emotional response, right? People don't want to admit that they're lonely, because when people admit that they're lonely, it almost is an admission of being unlovable or being
I
undesirable
get it.
or not having the ability or capacity to make meaningful connections with others. But that's just simply not the case. When someone feels lonely, it's the equivalent of them feeling hungry. Like when I feel hungry, that's my brain's way of saying, you need nourishment. Like you need to go out, get some food and replenish. When I feel lonely, that's just my brain's way of saying, you need to forge a connection. Like you need to go do something right now that is going to give you that sensation of a pull towards another human being. And even though it's that simple with why those feelings of loneliness kick in, it is a very charged word and a very charged sensation. So what happens is when I talk about loneliness and I talk about the feelings of social disconnection and I explain what it is and why it happens, and I give the science and the research, people lean in and go, yeah, that's it. Like I didn't know that was why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. And when we think about loneliness in the context of work, it's really interesting because at work, there's all of these connection points that contribute to our feelings of loneliness. There's connection to ourselves. There's connection to our work, colleagues. There's connection to our boss, to the culture, to our clients, to the work and how that work makes us feel. So if we look at this spectrum of all of the different connection points, if there's gaps and our quotas for some of these points are not being met, I'm going to go to work feeling like, hey, you know what? Something's off.
Yeah.
I'm not getting the sensations I need with some of these connection points, and people will start to feel removed, disconnected, and not necessarily as tied into the thread of the team or the work as they possibly could.
I love the fact that you brought up the point of you're helping organizations and leaders by giving them the science and the language to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Because for me, that was a struggle for a long time. I didn't have the words, the science, the language to have a conversation.
Part of our goal of writing the book was to destigmatize the feeling of loneliness, because it's not shameful. It's just a signal. And when we think about it as a signal and we think about how amazing loneliness is, the feeling of loneliness is incredible, because that is our biological way to make sure that we're connected, that we are getting reminded that, hey, like our relationships matter. Our community matters. The people we surround ourselves with and how they make us feel, that matters. And if they're not giving me what I need, that's my body's way of saying, like, you got to go figure this out and get it from somewhere else because it's that important to our species, right? It's that important to the success of anybody that we interact with. And when I've reframed how I think about these sensations and how I talk about them, it's pretty powerful. And I'm a big believer that, we are the accumulation of the connections we have in our life.
What are the main things that are driving sort of pervasive levels of loneliness at work? What are some of the major things that you're seeing?
There's a few that are really obvious. Remote work is very much a driving factor. And it's not because remote work in and of itself doesn't allow for feelings of connection to take place. It's because when we're working remotely and we're communicating through digital mediums, the way in which we communicate is just different. And unless we're really intentional about changing some of the ways we communicate, it typically just doesn't happen in a remote working environment. And we'll talk about the difference between communication and connection as we get into our session.
You said it's different the way we do it. What's an example of that?
So when we communicate, usually through Zoom at work, our conversations are tactical. We're figuring out who's doing what by when and where. We're solving problems. We're coming up with plans. We're brainstorming. All of the tactical information is frontal lobe processed. That's a part of the brain that is able to register data and information. I feel connected to someone. That happens in a totally different part of our brain. The feeling of connection happens when someone feels really listened to and someone feels really interested in. When you ask me meaningful questions and I get the sense that you really care. When you provide empathy. So connection requires communication, but it requires way more than the pervasive work communication that we tend to engage in all day long. And if we're going from Zoom call to Zoom call to Zoom call, oftentimes those opportunities for connection just aren't there. Whereas if we're together in person and we're sharing a meal, or we have breaks in between meetings and we're just sitting around a table, or if I'm bored and I stand up and I go talk to someone in their cubicle down the way, that's when we see more of the like interpersonal connective activities that now in a remote working environment aren't happening organically. So if we're working remote, we have to be really intentional about how do we bake in time to do some of the connective exchanges versus just going from thing to thing to thing and keeping things really tactical in nature. So that's the difference.
Yeah. You see a lot of people though that do we'll spend 5 minutes before the meeting saying, how are you?
Yeah, no.
I thought you would say that. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
When you do anything and it comes across as a check in the box, people think this is garbage. This is BS. Mm-hmm. Like, we're just doing this because you think we have to. When you are doing things that are really structured and we know, hey, we're going to spend, let's just say 30 minutes doing something that is really connective, or we're going to have some kind of a team bonding, or we're just going to focus on checking in with each other. Like, there's all kinds of things we can do, and we'll get into some of those strategies in a bit. It has to be dedicated time, and there has to be intentionality, and it has to mean something. If it's not intentional, and if there's not a real reason behind what you're doing, people are going to see through the fluff, and they're going to be like, let's just get on to our meeting because we're here to do that, not this.
So if you're going to do it, you have to do it separate from the frontal cortex work. Don't mix it in the same, like everyone, 99% of people I know, I check in with the team in the first 5-10 minutes of the call and then we jump into the work. And I when I do it myself with my team, it just feels forced. It feels 100%. Fake. And then you're right. You can see everyone in the room is just saying, okay, when are we going to get on with the meeting?
Which is very different than us saying, hey, once a month for an hour, we're going to do this exercise and we're really going to check in and we're going to go around the room and we're going to share where we're winning and where we're having a hard time. There's an activity that I like called boosters and blockers. Boosters and blockers is just opportunities for teams to say, where are we winning? Like, where are we really having a lot of success? And then the blockers are, where are we having a really hard time? And let's dive deep into why we're having a hard time. And for each individual, where are you having a hard time? And let's talk about these things and let's really explore. And that dedicated time, which is really just for checking in, is a very different sensation than, all right, everyone, you good? Yeah, how's your weekend? Good? Yeah, okay. Did you guys do anything fun? No? All right, let's dive into the meeting. That's not connective, right? It has the opposite effect, because then what happens is leaders think, oh, I'm doing these things.
Yeah.
Like, I'm creating opportunities for connection. And if they think they're doing it, they're missing huge opportunities to actually do it correctly. And that's why, we see these big gaps. We know that 72% of people feel socially disconnected at work on a monthly basis. 55% of people say they feel socially disconnected every single week. 69% of employees say they don't have enough opportunity for social connection at work. And we know 3 in 5 employees say that their leaders are not doing a good enough job of trying to build strong community and connectedness within the organization. So this is something that most people are going to work feeling like, I'm not getting enough of this. My quota is not being met because I'm just working. I'm doing thing after thing after thing. It's not a one-off happy hour every year. It's not a one-off team building retreat. It's not these big things we do on a very spread out continuum. It's how are we every single month or every single week doing some of these little things that make a big difference? And that's the key to having a really strongly connected group.
I love boosters and blockers. I'm going to use that for my next. I'm going to set a meeting in the calendar once a month. That's a really good idea.
And I stole it from Salesforce. Salesforce is one of my clients, and they do this boosters and blockers. So now Salesforce, I stole, you steal from me. It's all coming back to Salesforce. So we'll give Salesforce the credit.
Shout out.
While me and you just take it and run with it.
We'll tag him in on LinkedIn when we post a comment. when we post this clip, we'll tag him in. What are some other big things that companies can do to strengthen the connection levels at work?
One of the big things, so one of the reasons why we're seeing really huge increases in loneliness, and it's one of the big reasons why Gen Z is the loneliest generation on the planet, is because we've seen this massive dependency shift. And dependency shift is this phenomenon where, 20 years ago, if I needed help or if I needed an answer to a question, I had to find a human. Like someone had to show me. Now, I don't need anybody. Like I just go onto YouTube, I go onto Google, I go into my LMS, I find a course. The opportunity to really teach and guide and help and, provide some of those opportunities to learn is just gone away. So one of the things that is really connective is when somebody asks somebody else for help, or when somebody asks somebody else, can you show me this? Or, hey, you're really good at A, B, and C. Can you give me like 15 minutes to show me how you do that? Feeling like you matter, feeling like you have knowledge and skills that are contributory, feeling like, you're desirable is really important and really connective in nature. So one of the things that we talk about in the book, and I talk about when I do workshops with clients, is this idea of the significance effect. If I can make you, Chris, feel really significant by asking for your advice, asking for help, saying like, I need you, Chris, because you're so good at A, B, and C to go do this for me, versus saying, Chris, can you go do this for me? There's a very different phenomenon when I am explicitly trying to make you feel like you really matter. And when I make you feel like you matter, that's connective, and you're going to feel good, and you're going to want to be around me. And there's this idea of becoming connectable, right? Like if someone's likable, they're easy to get along with. When someone's connectable, they're easy to connect with. And making somebody else feel good is a very connectable thing to do. So if you think about work, there's lots of opportunities to lean into those significant effect moments. And leaders who are really good at that tend to have really close teams with a strong sense of belongingness.
What does that look like? Is it just noticing someone in the flow of work and commenting on that? Like, what does that look like?
It looks like a whole bunch of things. I encourage my leaders to write letters. There's just something really powerful about taking 5 minutes to write somebody a letter, and really thinking about the words you want to share with them for why they impressed you or why they did something exceptional. It looks like stopping someone and giving them very, very honest feedback. Say, what you just did was amazing. And here's why it was amazing. And here's why you need to know that this is amazing. Versus saying, good job, well done, that was great.
Be specific about
it. We tend to speak in, we speak in superlatives, and we tend to think like, oh yeah, I thank my team. I tell them good job all the time. That's very different than having a one-on-one moment with someone to say, Chris, I really am impressed with how you just did this really specific thing. Significance is really like making sure that people understand the value and the impact of their work, and it's really clear. And leaders don't spend enough time diving a little bit deeper into what their people are doing to give them that feedback. And it's a big deal. The other thing that, significance effect you can do is I love having either weekly or monthly. The term is kind of cheesy, so you can change the term, but they're called crushes. And the idea is every week or every month, the team gets together and they crush one another. Like, I want to recognize Chris because this week he really went above and beyond with this client. Or I want to thank Jessica because she was amazing this week with this, and this. Or Mariah, man, thank you, Mariah, for doing. And when you can get the team members to recognize each other and make each other feel really good and crushed, that makes them feel good and significant, right? So that takes 30 minutes, and you can do it once a week or once a month. And it's those little things that's intentional. Like, hey, we're going to do our weekly crush. Who wants to share something really great about
You know
somebody?
what we should do? I'm going to say it right now. We're going to post this clip on LinkedIn, and everyone's going to be hearing this right now on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn right now, when you watch this video, recognize someone in the chat below.
Crush them.
Crush them. I want everyone to comment below, tag in your colleagues, friends right now on LinkedIn, and something that you're going to recognize them from. Let's see how many crushes we can create right now on LinkedIn.
1 million crushes.
1 million. Let's do it. We're calling it out right now, right? This might be a viral video right now. Crush
1 million crushes.
We want 1 million crushes in the comments.
Who do you want to recognize?
Who do you want to recognize?
Who's important to you? Who did something awesome that you want to call out? Let's crush them.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm really excited to post that now to see everyone. Ivan, make sure you mark that as a clip for the episode. I know what I love about all the things that you're sharing. These aren't expensive, these are very simple things to do, but have huge impact.
Yeah. What's interesting, Chris? So we go back to soccer. My oldest is 6, and I'm coaching her soccer team, and it's like a train wreck. It's a real.
I can imagine.
Wreck.
My
These
daughter's
girls
5, so
are 6, right? So, as a coach of a bunch of 6-year-olds, I've noticed, because I pay attention to this stuff, when someone on the team does something really exceptional. Like, I had practice yesterday, and one of the girls on the team, her name is Sloan, and Sloan had this really, really nice play, and I said, Sloan, that was amazing. Like, that was amazing. And I saw her face light up. Like, she knew that message meant something. But all practice long, I say, girls, yeah, good job. Hey, way to go. That was great. Totally different, right? A totally
100%.
Different response when I say it like that. One of the things that was really cool when we were writing our book is we came across this study that found 2 people can have what's called a restorative exchange. Like, me and you are together, and we feel really good after this exchange where our connection quotas both have been increased. We leave with a increased level of happiness, and our vibration level is higher than it was before we had this exchange. And what they found is 2 people can have this experience in less than 40 seconds. 40 seconds, that's all it takes for me and you to share a moment together, and for you to leave that moment feeling like, oh yeah, I feel good. Like, that guy just made me feel good. Yeah. Standing in line at the grocery store, anytime anybody says anything about my kids, like, hey, your kids are really well behaved, or man, your 2-year-old, she is so cute. One little comment makes me feel amazing and seen and appreciated. And we don't do that enough because we got our noise canceling headphones in, we're on our phones, we're not paying attention. And at work, there's all these little opportunities to really acknowledge, right? Share a laugh, share a smile, say something nice. And that continuously is what fuels a lot of the levels of connection.
You mentioned vibration level. I want to jump into that because that's something that I've been obsessed with for a while. I'm not a religious person, but I definitely feel like the energy that I put out there massively dictates what I attract.
There are these things in our brains called mirroring neurons, and mirroring neurons are designed for us to get in sync with other people, right? So like, if you look really angry, my mirroring neurons are going to say, ooh, like, he's angry, and it's going to cause me to feel some of your anger. Or if I'm laughing and I'm really happy and you hear me and see me laugh, what do? Even if you don't know why I'm laughing, you get the sensation of like, oh, I should laugh also. So what happens is the emotions that we're omitting are very contagious. And if I'm around people who are emitting connective emotions and are happy and are trying to pull me in and are smiling at me or saying nice things, we're both going to leave that exchange amplifying each other's vibrations. And that's what I mean when I say vibration. I don't have like a measurement or some kind of like a technical, but there is something to it. And I do my best whenever I interact with anybody to come in with as high of a vibration as possible. And I smile a lot and I do my best to like really lean in to the conversation that I'm having and recognize any opportunity I can when I'm with people. And I can feel it. Like it's
A
amazing
hundred
how
percent.
you can.
Like, there's quite a few people in my life that I immediately think of when you said that. Chester Elton is one,
Yeah,
right? Whenever
he's a happy guy.
when I speak to him, is his level of vibration is like I don't I'm smiling now just talking about him. You
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
you're smiling just thinking because we
Yeah.
both know his personality and how he is. Donald Knight, if you're listening right now, Chief HR Officer of Greenhouse Software. Whenever he walks in the room, you just feel this energy. It lifts the whole room, and
Yeah.
this and it immediately just like to your point, like everyone just sort of gets energized by that, and it kind of creates a different dynamic. But the same goes for the opposite, though, right? There was a point where my team said to me, and I had to take that feedback. There's sometimes we don't know who's going to walk in the door in the morning, Chris. Is it
Yeah.
going to be the happy, energized Chris, or is it going to be stressed out, upset Chris? And that immediately affects the entire mood of the entire team and everyone in the
But
business.
here's the thing, Chris, like it's not fair and it's not realistic to think everybody's going to be at a 10 every day.
I
Like,
understand that. Yeah.
you know, and there is something really connective. If you show up feeling whatever, overwhelmed, stressed, exhausted, and you lean into that and say, guys, rough night last night or rough week this week, or I just had this really brutal exchange with a client and here's what's going on. All of those moments also super connective because you're being what most people would consider vulnerable, not in the sense where you're having to share all these really, painful memories or experiences, but you're just able to be really open and raw and genuine and honest. And that is connective also. I get oftentimes feedback when I do my workshops, people being like, a lot of your strategies are only for extroverts. And I'm like, no,
Mm,
they're not. We tend to Introverts oftentimes think that when I'm explaining things, only extroverts can do them. But when I break down some of these strategies and I say, can you do this? Can you like help make somebody feel significant? Yeah, I can do that. Like clarity is really important for connection. If people feel like they're wandering and they're lost at work, that's disconnective. Who do I turn to? Where do I go? I'm not sure what to do. That sensation is disconnecting. So leaders who are really good at being clear in the messages, checking in, following up, giving feedback, like introverts can do that really well. There's a lot of these things that we don't have to be these big personalities to be connectable. We just have to be mindful of how we're treating people, how we're making them feel, and how we're showing up in those moments.
I love the fact that you brought up the point of those moments of me feeling overwhelmed. In the past, I thought by sharing it, it'd be a negative outcome. But to your point, I
Yeah.
realized it's actually the opposite. So now I've been more vocal with the team. Literally, last week there was a day where I had like 2 hours sleep because my daughter was unwell, and I knew I had two podcasts that morning, and I just messaged the team and was like, I just can't. I like in the past I would have just soldiered through. I wouldn't have told anyone, and I would just, it would and everyone's like, okay, Chris is really struggling, but he doesn't want to say anything because I thought that was what you did as a leader. You showed your strength and push through. But I was like, oh, okay, this is doing a lot more damage. And the moment I started saying to the team like, okay, I'm not feeling great, or like this, right, and communicating, they stepped up and they helped me, and they also come to me when they're feeling that way now.
There's oftentimes this misconception on what people think vulnerability is. People think vulnerability is this requirement where I have to like open up the closet and tell you all of my deepest, darkest secrets, or I have to cry. If I'm crying and really omitting a lot of emotion, then I'm being vulnerable. That's not vulnerability. I mean, it could be, but vulnerability could be as simple as saying, like, I don't know. I'm
Yes.
not sure what we do. Like, I need help. There is one of my favorite books is called The Culture Code. I'm not
Hmm.
sure if you've
Yeah.
read Daniel Coyle's book, The Culture Code.
Hmm.
And the three elements that he says are essential for really strongly connected cultures. One of them is leaders' ability to be vulnerable. And he gives this example of the leader of SEAL Team 6, right? And SEAL Team 6, high quality Navy SEAL military group. And the leader of that group is incredibly vulnerable by being able to say, guys, I'm not sure. That's his line. Like, I'm not sure. What do you tell me? Like, I need help. Give me some of your ideas. Like, we need to figure this out together. That's vulnerability versus a leader being like, here's what we do. Command and control. You do this, you do this, you do this. Totally
Even
different
when you're
sensation.
unsure, which is crazy. Like I had the similar moment during the pandemic where obviously we lost 90% of our revenue. We had a meeting. Everyone was looking at me for the answers. And that was my answer. I don't know. Like, we're going to figure it out together. I don't know. And it was really hard. Like, I didn't sleep the whole night. I was like, I can't believe I'm coming to the team saying I don't have a plan. You know, they're relying on me. Their families are relying on me. I had all this stress. And I was like, okay, I just got to be honest and walk in the room and say, I don't have a plan, but
Yeah.
together we can. And that's probably one of the most powerful. Out of that came this whole business.
There's this really cool book. It's called Influence is Your Superpower. And Zoe Chance is the woman who wrote it. She's a professor at Yale and she's really smart. And oftentimes when we think about influencing others, we think about how are we going to be convincing, persuasive? How are we going to get the words right in order for them to go, yep, I want to do what he's asking me to do. And in the book, she says influence is oftentimes most powerful when you ask what she calls the magic question. The magic question is, what would it take? It's like if I want you to go do something, instead of me telling you what you should do, if I say, hey, what would it take for us to do X, Y, Z? Or what would it take for you to achieve this, this, and this? And by asking that question, it does a lot of things, right? Like it gets us into problem solving mode. It gets realistic ideas on the table. It gives off the impression that this can be done. And I'm not having to convince you of anything. You're giving me the little bit of, breadcrumbs, and then I can pick them up and help guide the conversation to where it needs to go. And you did something like that too. Like, what would it take? Like, how are we going to get from here in this really awful pandemic ridden, our business just blew up, to wherever we're going to go when people can rally behind that and feel contributory? Man, that's connective.
Man, I love it. Listen, before I let you go, we didn't even name the name of the book. So firstly, give the book a shout out. Like, what's the name of the book? Where can people grab a copy of your book? And then also, where can they connect with you if they want to reach out?
Yeah. The book is called Connectable: How Leaders Can Move Teams from Isolated to All In. It's all over the place, right? So it's on Amazon, it's in Barnes and Nobles. You can listen to the audiobook on Audible. It's very accessible. So if you just type in Connectable book, the best place to connect with me is LinkedIn. So Steven Van Cohen, I'm pretty easy to find. The website I'm going to recommend you go to is not a dating site. It's called lesslonely.com. Lesslonely.com is where you go. Again, this is for all things workplace connection. This isn't a dating profile place. But lesslonely.com has videos and articles and all kinds of stuff from our book and some really good resources to help figure out how do we take our team's level of connectedness and enhance it to the nth degree. So that's where people can connect with me.
Amazing, man. Well, listen, I'm so happy we connected
Yeah.
on that point. And I'm super excited to get the book into the hands of all of the HR leaders that listen to the show. And I think the impact it's going to have on them and their teams and globally, that ripple effect is going to be huge. So I appreciate you for all of the work that you're doing, and I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Appreciate you, Chris. Thank you.